I'm joined now by Ken Dilanian. He's, of course, our Justice Intelligence correspondent here at NBC News. Marc Caputo is our senior national political reporter, as his ears and eyes in Trump world. Two of our NBC News legal analysts are also here, defense attorney Danny Cevallos and former federal prosecutor Carol Lam. Ken, let me get started with you here, and it's to get at Andrew Weissman's point, this strong filing. I want to start with one of the first excerpts from their filing, which it felt like almost a troll of Trump. The FBI, in a matter of hours, recovered twice as many documents with classification markings as the, quote, diligent search, unquote, that the former president's counsel and other representatives had weeks to perform, calls into serious question the representations made in the June 3rd certification and casts doubt on the extent of cooperation in this matter. And let me add, if the control room can put up page 9, because page 9 to me is also important here, because in that part of this, and I hope I have this correctly here, it says that essentially law enforcement, here it is, the former president's counsel explicitly prohibited government personnel from opening or looking inside any of the boxes that had remained in the storage room, giving no opportunity for the government to confirm that no documents with classification markings remain. Now, I want to get everybody's timeline straight here. That was when it was a voluntary exercise. And then the search warrant said, we gathered all this up basically in no time. That seemed to be a real, they basically are informing the Trump folks, you've already committed a crime.
How many times in Washington, Chuck, will we say it's not the crime, it's the cover-up? I mean, that's the message of this filing, that if they had just given the documents back when they were first asked, or even pursuant to a grand jury subpoena, none of this might have happened. They are now accusing the Justice Department, as the Trump team, essentially, of obstruction of justice. They're saying they found evidence of obstruction, that they were lied to. And as the federal prosecutors on our panel can tell us, when the government is lied to, that becomes almost more important to the investigators than the underlying crime. They smell blood, and they move to file charges. We've seen in many cases. We don't know if it's going to happen here, but the idea that they were assured in writing by the custodian of records, which we assume is one of the Trump lawyers, that all the documents had been turned over, and yet they still wouldn't let this senior Justice Department official look in the boxes in the storage room. Right. And then the FBI goes in and finds twice as many documents as classified documents as were turned over pursuant to the grand jury subpoena. That is just first of all, it's inexplicable on the side of the Trump team why anybody would allow that to happen. But it means that this is much more serious than we had first understood.
So, Carol Lam, here's a simple question that I've asked my own team all day today, and I think others are asking, which is, do they already have enough to indict, and why wait?
It's interesting to listen to the reporting that's going on about this, because for former prosecutors or current prosecutors, it's like watching an investigation being looked at backwards or inside out. The question, why don't they indict right now? What are they waiting for? Well, first we have to establish, if they were going to indict somebody, who are they going to indict? The former president is very good at insulating himself from what appears to be decisions that are made by his team. And so if I were running this investigation, and they know a lot that I don't know, but when you do this kind of investigation, you get the documents first, and then you go to testimony. Then you confront witnesses with the documents, and you ask them questions about it. I believe they're at that stage now, and there's a long ways to go. Because remember, in a white-collar kind of case, or in any criminal case, you have to consider not only what your proof of the crime is, but you have to be able to bat away any potential defenses. So if I were in their shoes now, I would be taking that custodian of records who said, we've done a diligent search, and based on what I know, we've turned over everything. Well, it turns out they only turned over 1/3 of the required documents. And then I would say, who told you that a diligent search had been conducted? And you work your way up from there. So that's why you're not seeing an indictment right now, because you have to cover every single base before you bring an indictment.
All right, Carol. So that means the next step, are we to expect subpoenas before a grand jury?
That's what I would expect is going on. But when you say, are we to expect, we are presumably not going to see that. That's going to be between the witness and the witness's counsel. Right.
I say this because the Trump team has a way of letting us know sometimes things that happen. I mean, Ken, are we back to watching watching the door to see who goes in and out of a grand jury
Yes.
here in D.C. these days?
Absolutely. And I think there are a lot of witnesses in this case whose identities are unknown to us, who may be down in Florida. And so we may not see the full picture.
Could they be doing this in other spots?
Absolutely.
Almost to protect themselves a little bit.
100%.
Danny Cevallos, I was trying to keep track of the number of lawyers that in defense of Donald Trump have put their law license essentially in jeopardy. Is that happened again?
I think that's pretty clear, at least from the government's viewpoint in their filing. The government clearly seems to believe that the lawyers who certified that all the documents were turned over are going to have some problems. And that leaves me nonplussed, because lawyers risk their license when they certify something. So we learn over time, you can't just take what the client tells you at face value. You've got to do a little digging before you sign a certification that is based on what the client has told you. I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Sometimes clients aren't forthcoming when it comes to the truth.
Yeah?
Sometimes they tell lawyers the version of the world that as they see it,
right,
or as they would like it to be. And if that's what happened here, if they certified something that they knew wasn't exactly right, or they didn't know when they certified it, that could be really problematic for them. And it is not that difficult to get your ticket pulled or lose your law license if you start certifying things that were not true and you didn't do a proper investigation.
Hey, look, it's one thing you wonder if the guy will ever pay. Now you have to wonder if you're going to be able to legally have a client after you're done representing Mr. Trump. Danny, let me ask you about the request for a special master. Is this an incompetency move here that they waited so long?
It's a strange move all around. Sure, it's strange that they waited so long, but what is the benefit to having a special master? That's a neutral third party who's presumably going to go through the documents and not automatically side with Trump, because the government isn't going to agree to some special master that's some higher up or muckety-muck in the Republican Party.
Right.
So they may lose just as much with a special master. And by the way, having waited this long, the documents have already been reviewed. Yeah, sure, the government says, oh, we had a filter team look at them, but do you know who's on that filter team? Other members of the government. So look, the government's reviewed all the documents. I actually was surprised that the government even bothered to oppose the special master and in addition ask for additional pages to do so. But they answered my questions in this filing. They were using this as an opportunity to set the factual record straight and add to it, lest you think these documents were not dangerous to national security. They were.
Marc Caputo, a little bit of the sort of fallout spin aspect of this from Team Trump. As usual, I assume it's the former president that is, quote, running all of the PR and all of the legal here, and that's why it's so chaotic?
Yeah, one of the things we saw with the January 6th investigation is President Trump, former President Trump, has a tendency to set up multiple silos of parallel information to reach him. So one group of advisors doesn't know what the other group of advisors is doing. So that advantages him in certain ways. In this case, it might have disadvantaged him. We've got some preliminary reporting that some people had told him, hey, you need to fight the feds on this. You shouldn't give them the documents. Now, that also might be an after the fact and invention by anonymous sources with their own agendas. The problem with Trump world is it's just not clear. We do know now he has hired a new lawyer, Chris Kise, the former Florida Solicitor General. He has a reputation as being a real professional in multiple silos, multiple areas of the law, from federal to state, appellate to criminal. He's not really a federal criminal defense lawyer, but considering the conversation we just had, there's at least two lawyers from Trump world who might no longer be lawyers.
Have you? There was a part of me, Mark, there was a part of me that wondered, do we need to check back in with Mr. Kise about whether he still took this gig after seeing the filing?
Well, I wrote the story yesterday because he had signed the document. So he's in for a penny, in for a pound. How many pounds and how many pennies, I'm not quite sure.
All right, Ken, I think the other interesting thing here is very early on, Merrick Garland, when a lot of folks, and including myself, like, hey, you do need to be more transparent, more forthcoming. He said something at the very beginning, and it came true in this filing. We're gonna speak basically for the rest of this investigation like we normally do through our filings. It goes back to what Danny said. They seem to go out of their way to want to get this out there, correct?
Oh, absolutely. And the Trump team let him do it. The Trump team paved the way for this to happen. and they took every advantage of him. Legal analysts who are looking at this filing say it's one of the most incisive, powerful pleadings they've seen in a long time. Clearly, some of the best minds at the Justice Department were put to work on this thing. It's clear. It introduces new facts. The picture, as you said, was designed to go viral, and it has gone viral. I mean, it was a powerful recitation. Now, but let's think about what's not in here. No hint that any of these classified documents were shared with an adversary or found their way out of Mar-a-Lago. That's important because we're all asking ourselves the question of why. Why did this happen? Why did he bring these documents to Mar-a-Lago? And then why did he resist? Why were these lies told? And is it just a matter that Donald Trump thought that he didn't have to turn these documents over to the archives and he was just being stubborn? Or was there something else at work here?
Carol, who's going to, I mean, you made it very clear that one of the reasons why they may not, the question is, who do you indict? Is it Mark Meadows as White House Chief of Staff who actually has the most exposure here if the former president chooses to decide that?
I think that what Ken was saying is very true. This has turned into more of an obstruction of justice case than the original removal of the documents. And we still don't know what's in those documents, but it's very clear from the allegations and the statutes that are cited in the search warrant itself that the Department of Justice is primarily concerned about the cat and mouse game that has gone on for the past 15 months or so with respect to these documents. So Mark Meadows may be a little bit removed from that, right? It's very hard to say. The specifics of who made that certification and on what basis they made that certification, it might stop short of the former president, or it might go all the way up to the former president. There's a lot of information in the original affidavit that was redacted about who gave them information and what information they gave them. So really all we have now is we have the fact of the documents, but we don't have the pieces sewn together in a way that only testimony can do. So that's why, unfortunately, we have to be patient still.
Right. You know, Danny, Carol brings up something else, and I'm curious, this is going to put the lawyer in an odd, the person that could end up, who told you to certify this, I mean, do you expect that lawyer to be brought before a grand jury?
Brought before a grand jury as a witness, I think we can safely expect that. But prosecuted, I'm not so sure, because it goes to what Judge Lam is talking about. Who actually took the documents and who was responsible for not giving them back? Certainly, in a way, this is a figurative indictment that the government filed last night, but it doesn't tell us who exactly had responsibility for either putting these documents in a box or repeatedly not giving them back to the government, except for those lawyers who supposedly certified and said that, oh, no, we've given everything back. That's where you see the government possibly focusing in. But even if they did call those folks before a grand jury, they're not going to get very much out of them because their attorneys are going to tell them, you're not testifying. This is Fifth Amendment time.
And Marc Caputo, we know the former president is venting on his own social media site. I got to think that they've noticed that there's a lot of silence suddenly with Republicans rallying around them, that they don't have the same energy that was there 3 weeks ago, that there is suddenly stories about candidates scrubbing their website of Trump references. How's that impacting Team Trump?
Team Trump, good question. Someone I spoke to President Trump over the weekend and told me he was shocked that the former president seemed detached from reality because all he was doing was talking about his poll numbers, his fundraising, and how his standing is still high and improving in a potential Republican primary campaign for president against Ron DeSantis. Now, President Trump speaks to multiple people and says multiple things, sometimes contradictory. So far, the through line we're hearing from everyone is that Donald Trump is positive about this, which, of course, puzzles the rest of the world because you have your house searched by the FBI and they're basically accusing you or your designees of obstruction of justice. Most people are going to be pretty freaked out. Apparently, Donald Trump isn't. I
had a Republican strategist say to me, he goes, I wish I could be as comfortable standing on a cliff as much as Donald Trump seems to enjoy standing on a cliff. He goes, but he lives there, which may be why it doesn't make him so nervous. It was an interesting metaphor, Mark.
Yeah. It's like a hurricane. He's literally the calm at the center of the storm he creates.
Yeah, it's a nice way to put it. Very quickly, Ken, It could be now weeks before we hear again about this case, officially.
Or months if the DOJ decides to apply their pre-election policy, and that's up in the air. Donald Trump's not on the ballot.
No, he's not. Fascinating. All right, Ken, Mark, Danny, and Carol, thank you all.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.